Authentication is about verifying the identity of a user, knowing the user is who they say they are. When you go and visit a website and it asks you to log in, you type a username and a password, that website verifies that you've typed the right password for that account and thus has authenticated you. It's validated your identity. But after it authenticates you, it needs to figure out what resources you should have access to. And that's what authorization is all about. Making sure that you have access to your data and only your data, or at the very least, only your appropriate data. So if you went and logged into your email account and you had access to your colleague Tom's email, this would be a bad thing. So that's what authorization is all about, making sure that you have access to only the right information. Questions for you. How many of you have ever shared a password with an application, a third-party app, so it could access your data on something like Google or Twitter or Facebook? Raise your hands. All right, some of you are just being shy here because I'm pretty sure everyone in this audience has done that at some point in time, and this is obviously very bad for the security of you. And it's also very bad for the security of users. As after all, you guys are developers, you have plenty of users. You should never be asking them for their passwords for any of these major account holders. So you have an opportunity. You have an opportunity as developers to eliminate the need for users to reveal the passwords to your application. At the same time, you have an opportunity to restrict the level of data available to your application to only what your application needs in order to make a good experience for your users. And then you have an opportunity to allow the users to revoke access to your app when your application no longer needs access to their data. This is your opportunity, but it's important to understand, I believe that you have an obligation to your users, an obligation to help keep your users safe. And so you have an opportunity, but also a responsibility here. The first step looks the same. The user experience here is the same. The user gets prompted and said, hey, this application needs access to Google Tasks. They go over to Google, and they get this screen. It looks very similar. The only difference here is the line at the bottom that says it needs access when you're not at your keyboard. So in this case, with the server-side flow, we're getting access to the user's data even when the user's not actively logged into their account. The user approves. Then it redirects to the application with this authorization code. The authorization code, you notice, is passed in a query parameter, not in a hash fragment. And the authorization code is sort of an intermediate code that's used to eventually get an access token. Because it's passed in the query parameter, though, it is passed to the back-end web server of the Taskman application. So the Taskman application gets that code and then calls over to the OAuth provider and exchanges that code for an access token, which it then uses to call the API. So slightly more complex than the previous flow, but it has this added benefit of giving you the ability to get offline access to the user's data. I've gone through and shown you how to do OAuth both for a client-side flow as well as a server-side flow. I've talked about how to do it on mobile applications. I've talked about how to use OAuth for identity and logging users into your site. I just want to remind you all that you guys have an obligation to help keep your users secure and to make for a great experience for your users. And I believe that the OAuth technologies really help you do that. In the latest version of OAuth 2, hopefully you've seen here, with the exception of the little bit of cryptographic signature work there, is much easier than the previous versions of OAuth. So I encourage you all to check it out a little bit more.